This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
We want to know more, do you? Informed Sources brings our region's top print and broadcast journalists together.
To examine the stories behind the headlines.
And we can all learn more.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Public safety was very much in the news this week, including encouraging news about crime rates in both Orleans and Jefferson Parish, and increased efforts for protection during Carnival. If there is a fight, an intense battle may be between two women with law enforcement experience running for sheriff in New Orleans. Also, there is a new solution to a tense problem that developed between two krewes last Mardi Gras Day. We'll look at these developments as well as, in this Black History Month, hear a little known story from the peak days of the civil rights struggle. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, John Simerman, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, LeBron Joseph, news anchor and reporter, WGNO TV Channel 26, and Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL Louisiana, Channel 4. And we're going to stick with Mike because we've gotten some good news in terms of crime stats for New Orleans and also for Jefferson Parish.
Yeah, really good news across the board, across parishes and across crime categories. And this is a continuation, actually, of the trends from 2024, where crime statistics were going down in both parishes, actually. And, you know, just to start, I'll give an answer that I often give when asked what's behind it all, and that is that if any city had, you know, a solution that always worked all the time, of course every city would copy that and we would have a lot less crime. Even criminologists who study this, you know, for a living will tell you that there are so many factors involved that it is hard to tease out exactly what's behind this. However, we do know several of those factors, and one predominant factor is that crime is down nationally. And this is really not just a region of the country, but truly nationally. And a lot of this, you know, you can kind of go back several years. COVID was a lockdown situation, and then the period right after that was lifted was very bad for crime, and people restless and cooped up. And then the numbers started trending down. We were a little late here in the New Orleans metro area, but eventually we're often kind of late on national trends. But from 2023 to 2024, the numbers started to improve dramatically. Now, it is no accident on the New Orleans side, there's been, you know, obviously a new police chief, Ann Kirkpatrick. She has brought, you know, some of her many years of experience at 9 different police departments as chief, and has brought some of those tactics to bear, as well as a real openness, and this is a big and maybe kind of behind the scenes part of the success in New Orleans, which is a lot of cooperation with state and federal law enforcement. I guess the most high profile would be the state police presidents, Troop NOLA. It's not just during Carnival or special events, but they're a permanent presence, and they have now come to sort of a smooth working arrangement with the NOPD. NOPD is still under the consent decree, even though they're in sustainment now, but curtailed in certain ways, such as car chases. They can only chase with permission after violent crime. State police don't have those restrictions. So the cooperative arrangement that has been reached now that, and technology is another part of this, with license plate readers all over the city, able to flag a license plate of a car that's been reported stolen, they can just get state police available and in the area to give that chase. And that's actually been happening, you know, quite a bit.
And you say in Jefferson Parish also crime rate down. I mean, it's lower than it was like since the 70s or something. I mean, look, it's really...
They are, and you could actually pick an individual, crime statistic and see, 20, 30, decade-long lows in Jefferson as well as New Orleans. I mean, that homicide rate in New Orleans of last year of 124, I think it was the second lowest since 1971. So it is at the modern day low. And what is really interesting in showing that this wasn't just, an anomaly of a year is that trend has continued into 2025. Now, granted, we're, not even quite 2 full months into the new year. However, the number's down 16% overall. However, if you take the New Year's terror attack out of that equation, we're down, some 35% over what was already, close to a record low in 2024. And so that means that's really, you take out the New Year's attack and look at just the, homicide by guns, down like 73%. Now, I'm going to, be mindful of my police officer friends who warn against, talking about the success because of the superstition that as soon as you start to brag about, not having a homicide, then you're going to see bad things happen. But no, it is a sustained trend, and I think, extremely welcome. Technology, as you mentioned, is another big part of this. There's been a full embrace of things like, there are more surveillance cameras and a network of them, cooperation with an outside vendor nonprofit called Project NOLA that has cameras, especially if you're looking at the CBD and throughout the French Quarter and on businesses. They immediately, just like they did in the terror attack, go to the Project NOLA cameras that actually have super high definition, better than the city's own crime cameras, and the use of facial recognition, which is somewhat controversial in some quarters. However, Project NOLA nonprofit, they're not restrained on their use of facial recognition.
This technology can certainly help after a crime has been committed to like track a car down or whatever, or make an arrest. How is the community also playing a part in this? Are people reporting crimes more?
Well, I will say that I did ask that question of Chief Kirkpatrick, and she said absolutely the community's input is dramatically better, and that signals a greater trust, and that has been built up pretty gradually. It's a multi-year process to get the confidence of citizens to call Crime Stoppers, to report crimes, to tell cops what they saw and heard. But you can tell the results of that by looking at the solve rates. And she has cited very, dramatic improvements in solving homicide rates, which had just traditionally in New Orleans been below the national averages of 56, 55%.
Some of the high-profile ones too, like the second-line shootings and all that.
But now we're above the national
where people are
averages.
actually calling into Crime Stoppers.
That's right.
It may have taken a couple of weeks, but people started to call in on those big cases too.
Well, it's certainly good news. We hope that trend continues too, because it does make for a happier community.
And look,
when
both,
we have a safer
both in
community.
Jefferson with Sheriff Lapinto and New Orleans with Chief Kirkpatrick, they do warn it's never time to let your guard down, to stay vigilant. All of the things like the public buy-in, community, members, the community calling in, that success should breed more of the same. You see quick arrests, and it makes people far more confident to call in and not think, calling will only bring maybe potential harm and not a solved case. Now they're pretty confident that people are getting arrested.
Okay. A trend we want to see continue. All right, Mike, thanks a lot. LeBron, let's go on over to you, because it looks like we got a hot contest starting to form for the sheriff's office in Orleans.
One of the most powerful offices in the city. Sheriff Hudson, this week, news made by the former chief or former superintendent, Michelle Woodfork, saying that, hey, I am running for the Orleans Parish Sheriff. Susan Hudson, the current sheriff, hasn't had the smoothest first term. She came in as an agent of change, of wanting to change the department. By all accounts, her beating former Sheriff Marlon Guzman was an upset. Low turnout. Sort of worked in her favor in a whole lot of ways. But she's had some stumbles. It's a department that's still under consent decree, and it doesn't appear as if it's coming out anytime soon on that. The battle with the mental health unit, where the city doesn't necessarily want this, the sheriff kind of on both sides of that in a sense saying, hey, we certainly need to address mental health, but on the other side thinking that that facility would be, cost prohibitive. But the controversies of the hotel rooms a year ago with the sheriffs and all of the folks that they're bringing in, only to find out, as Mike and we were talking about earlier, that many of the rooms were empty, and was it a waste of money, or for someone who's coming in to be a reform artist? And then the firings, which were high ranking firings, an attorney under her and some other folks that were in administrative positions. None of that washed out well. So save it all to say that not only is former Superintendent Michelle Woodfork entering the race, but also confirmed to be entering the race Ed Shorty, who is the second city court constable on the West Bank, and speaking with former Sheriff Marlon Guzman just yesterday, he says he is strongly considering getting in the race as well.
And Edwin Shorty, even though that name might not, be
as popular,
kind of known throughout the community. He's big on the West Bank,
yes,
which is his base of operations, and it looks like he has the support of the area's congressman.
That is correct.
Troy Carter, and that's a pretty big backing to start with.
Yes, a big Algiers following, and that's a significant part of the city as well, and known throughout the city. Prior to becoming the constable, he'd run was a partner in a law firm, Shorty, Dooley and Hall. They split after a couple of years, and he's been a local attorney for many, many years, involved civically as well. On the money side, it's hard to believe that anyone would have more political capital on hand, than the sheriff, an incumbent, if you will. However, Michelle Woodfork this week, with her announcement over at Dookie Chase's, there were a lot of big names there, and a number of council people as well. So it'll be interesting. It's going to be an interesting race. It is the one race that we know some of the some of the opposition, if you will, or some of the candidates, or at least most of the candidates.
Considering who she works for now,
yes,
that's a major political base.
Yes, she works at the DA's office.
Working for Jason Wayne.
That's right.
When she was elected,
as well.
When Hudson was elected, was the opposite of what you described, because people didn't know who she was.
That is correct.
It was really a surprise election. It was like, well, who's this person that just got elected sheriff who defeated an incumbent who's been part of city life a lot?
Was she in the independent police monitor? Yeah, there you go.
10 years at IPM, right?
And so the Sheriff Hudson, what is she saying about this and getting these opponents now? What is she saying
Sheriff
about
Hudson
why
is
she should be reelected?
She welcomes the competitors to the race, and that she feels she needs to be reelected in order to continue making some of the improvements that she has made. I think, if you could put it succinctly, a more humane way for us to have a city jail. We live in an environment, man, where some folks don't want that and don't feel that that's the way to run the jail,
Right.
But that being said, yes, the things that happen in a city jail, in a city prison, or whatever you want to call it, have happened under her watch. There have been some deaths under in custody deaths. None of them have been tied to the sheriff's office in any way, where in fact there appears to be any misconduct, which is good for her. But there was also the riot deal, if you will, which is an interesting one.
So things that we'll probably hear a lot about over these next months, since there is going to be opposition
At least
to her
one thing
reelection.
that's changed about the discussion is, I remember the discussion about the sheriff's office used to be, how many people have escaped lately?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't hear that much. I guess maybe Charlie Foti gets credit for building a new jail or something. But at least it's a different topic. It's dealing with humanity issues, that sort of thing.
Yeah, interesting topic for Susan Hudson, and it's a double-edged sword. There have been sort of in-house scandals. Contraband being brought in by guards. There was an embezzlement, theft of high-ranking people inside the jail. Now, to her credit, they uncovered this and announced it. But the flip side of that is this was going on your watch.
Yes. There was a time when she also has probably run the most transparent, if you will, sheriff's office insofar as there was a time when we would get, now I haven't seen them in a minute, but we would get incident reports. And there were a lot of incidents that happened in the jail over the course of a week
we
or so.
will continue to talk about this in the weeks, because this is definitely going to be a contest.
Yeah.
All righty, LeBron, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay, John, over to you. It is Carnival time, and so how are we going to be kept safe?
Yeah, the January 1 attack, the vehicle attack on Bourbon Street has really changed how Carnival is going to look, at least for this year, where the threat level is elevated, the federal threat level to that Super Bowl level of Tier 1 that people have all heard about. That means a ton of federal resources. You're going to see a lot of the stuff that we have seen, but already out there on the St. Charles Avenue route, we're seeing these new barriers set up along the route, but also in the middle of the lake side of St. Charles, the off-parade side, where authorities are trying to slow people down and make sure they don't get up ahead of steam.
Because traffic can continue to run down.
But now they're saying it's going to continue to run down. You've got these big orange barriers on St. Charles that they're going to, I'm told, fill with water, and they're going to be positioned so in a serpentine way, Police Chief Ann Kirkpatrick said. So you're going to be able to drive uptown, up that side, and weave, through these barriers. And so that's, part of the difference we're going to see, I think. And I think that the message is keep your drones on the ground and keep your ice chests and coolers
close to you.
Close to you. Or you might find an ATF agent with a bomb-sniffing dog snooping around, or a Homeland Security investigations guy. That's what they're saying, is they're going to be out there, lots of people in plain clothes, local, federal drones. They can take them out of the air. If you put yours up there, they say they're going to put them in the river. Mississippi River. We'll see.
So don't fly your drones, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So the feds are still involved in this, right?
Very much. So Homeland Security Investigations is the same guy, Eric DeLone, who's the Louisiana guy who headed up the Super Bowl security preparations, the federal coordinator. He's also leading the Super Bowl, or the Mardi Gras preparations. He says he really wants to maintain the culture that we have, and he's not looking to make anything incredibly different. A lot of the traffic stuff you see is dictated by the city. But they're here in force, and they've got a lot of technicians out. There's some big ATF mobile command center out there, and they're going to be taking all this intelligence from the Real-Time Crime Center and from Project NOLA and all these cameras and, online, social media stuff that they're going to be, it's sort of the full panoply of all the federal security measures that come into play for an event that's big. And so that's all kind of going to envelop Mardi Gras this year, and we'll see how it goes and what they learn. Just see William Bratton, the former police chief in New York City and LA. He's going to be riding on one of the floats because he's coming in afterwards, and his team is going to be making recommendations for going forward. How do we deal with some of these things?
Now, he's been here since shortly after the New Year's attack.
He's been back and forth.
Right.
His team has been in and out.
He was hired, and
he's been hired by the police.
There was the after action, of obviously January 1st.
Correct.
And he's been consulting, heading up to Carnival season. What specifically has he brought to the table?
Well, on this, what he says is that, their job is more looking after. The feds are in charge here. They're going to make some recommendations. They're going to be here next week. Bratton and his team are going to be talking about Frenchman Street security and around that area. And and they're going to be talking to the public. They're going to be starting after Mardi Gras in this time period to come out a little bit more. They're trying to learn some lessons here. His input to this is secondary to what the feds are doing in conjunction with the city, is my understanding.
It looks like Jackson Square is also being looked at as, for heightened security as well.
And right now you've got all those archers, those Marine archers all around there. And
so in the French Quarter, is the Super Bowl security sort of going to be replicated?
Some of it, and some of that's going to stay, I think, in terms of having the ability to use those lifts and whatnot to move traffic with the wedge barriers. Some of it's, that's part of what Bratton's here to decide, is how big are these bollards going to be? Where are they going to be? How are they going to deal with events that come in and have to come out? Because as people have said, you can't get in the backside of those Bourbon Street businesses anywhere. You have to come in there to deliver stuff. And so how they're going to work that all out.
Okay, so heightened security because of Bourbon Street. January 1st. I mean, Mardi Gras is always heightened security, but even more so now.
Extra.
All right, John, thanks a lot. Okay, E, still talking Mardi Gras, a big change for one of the major crews.
Yeah, first of all, I was just thinking when you mentioned that the crime consultant will ride on one of the floats, it's probably the first time that a crime consultant has been in a situation where it's required to wear a mask. So
That's one of the challenges.
Last year, the night of Mardi Gras, if you're looking around and at the ball and everything, everybody seemed happy, but there's a lot of tension behind the scenes last year, at least on the rec side. Because the parades ran late, it's always Zulu goes first and then Rex. And I'm not trying to say that because these crews were working together for a long time. And the fact that Zulu goes first has more of a burden of being first. But it ran late, and then what happened, it was so late that the crew, like the maids and Queen, always watched the parade by the Intercontinental Hotel. The parade wasn't even there by the time they had to leave. They got to leave at 2 o'clock to go do their other duties. So the Rex people were really upset. And part of the problem, every time you hear about this issue, is like Jackson Avenue. Part of it is Zulu's own popularity.
Yeah.
So many people go about
It's
Jackson,
a big, long parade,
popularity.
too. Oh my God, it's long.
Yeah, Jackson Avenue. It tends to do a lot of the stops and toasting and all of this. Now, I gotta say, the two men who head up the two organizations were co-chairs of the Mardi Gras committee. They know each other, they like each other, get together. And they could have made this a very volatile public thing, but they didn't. It was all worked on quietly, and I kind of respect that. But what it came down to is Rex says that Rex, have to make a change because they can't be doing this at the Intercontinental Hotel because that's way down the line. And by the time, if there's any breakdown at all, everything's going to be late. So they're moving their reviewing stand. This is the reviewing stand for the Queen and the maids to Pascal's Manali on Napoleon by Dryads, and they're putting up a reviewing stand there. And so that's only 11 blocks away from where the parade starts.
Right.
And so it won't be late by the time it gets there. And so they feel doing that's going to make the whole thing move faster. Their timing, and Rex is Rex is like the Marines on timing, okay? Their timing, the way they want to do it, they want to start at 10:30, they want to end at 2:30, all right? And when they don't end at 2:30, that backs up the trucks, it backs up everything else, and so they want to do that. And so it's going to be unusual to have the Pascal Manali reviewing stand. Pascal Manali is owned by Dick Brennan, and I think his uncle or cousin is Pip Brennan, who started Bacchus, and so there's still a little bit of a Mardi Gras connection. But it is a big move, but from a public perspective, I think it's going to be good, because all those people along St. Charles are going to be able to see that. Whereas at the Intercontinental...
And that's where Rex toasts his Queen.
Yeah.
And so instead of at the end of not the end of the route, but farther down the route, it's at the beginning.
They can still do the toast at Gallia Hall, but after that, it's straightforward, okay? On the answer to if they're going to get any barbecued shrimp, okay? I mean, if you're Pascal's Manali.
Have a little taste
but
of
it's
that.
a problem they've been dealing with for years. How to move this parade better at the beginning, and finally someone came up with this.
Okay.
And so it's the Pascal Manali's cure.
A change for this Mardi Gras. Okay, Thanks a lot. And let's wrap up with you, LeBron, because this is Black History Month.
Yes.
And you wanted to tell us a story that happened during that time of civil rights that's really close to home to New Orleans.
The contribution of New Orleans to the civil rights story, certainly we don't get the notoriety as your Mobiles or, Memphis, obviously, because Dr. King being killed there, and, some of these other southern cities or whatever. However, the contributions from New Orleans folks are significant. You certainly had the core chapter here over at the Castle Haley leading that. The Freedom Riders, a lot of them leaving out of here, Jerome Smith and Dottie Smith-Simmons and folks like that. Leah Chase in the role of the Dookie Chases. But Don Hubbard, who's a local businessman, Don Hubbard would have run SSI, Superdome Services Incorporated, when the Dome first opened. He and Sherman Copeland. He owns the Hubbard Mansion on St. Charles Avenue. But Don was a young father. He was in the movement, but he got married at 19, and while Jerome and them could go and do the sit-ins and the bus stuff and all that, he had young children at home. But he played his part. A number of Hollywood and celebrity folks across the country financed a lot of what was happening in the movement. Send money for this or whatever. Lena Horne provides a couple of vehicles for Freedom Summer, but needed someone to go and get them. So they fly Don Hubbard up to New York. He picks up the vehicles in White Plains, or one of them. That's the Falcon station wagon that the 3 people in Mississippi, those kids were killed in.
Wow.
He drove it from New York to here. He says he was scared to death. There were signs and stuff, protest signs and different things and books and all that in the back, covered in sheets or whatever. He says, man, I was so scared driving that thing, brand new automobile. But he drove it on in, and again, that was the car.
That was
you know,
the
it's
car.
in all them historic pictures and all of that. It's notoriety in the wrong way for that
In the wrong
automobile,
way, a real
but he's
tragic-
the guy.
tragic incident with the
Terrible
civil rights
story.
history.
But they found those 3 young people murdered in Mississippi.
Right.
But Don, he's full of a lot of stories. He's got a lot of pictures and all that. You ever get a chance to talk to him, he is one heck of a guy, and I always love a conversation with Don. Yeah.
And he became very active in that era with a lot of new black political activist
Yes.
organizations. He was
Yes.
like Soul, I believe,
was
his group, yeah.
Yeah, still active.
And then he owned a mansion on St. Charles.
He
now or
does.
something?
The Hubbard Mansion. He and his wife Rose opened, built it from ground up, actually, on a piece of property they bought on St. Charles Avenue. Even the story of them buying the property on St. Charles Avenue in what would have been the 80s or whatever, you know, it wasn't very easy for a man that looks like Don Hubbard, you know, not because he didn't have the finances, but because no one wanted to sell them the property. And so.
It sounds like a figure who he was maybe a little behind the scenes in civil rights, and then he
But still
translated
so
that to
important.
being behind the scenes in politics as well.
Being behind it, he's a bit of a kingmaker. Yeah, he
Okay,
certainly
very
is.
interesting. All right. Thanks a lot, LeBron. Okay, guys, we're just about out of time, so we got to wrap it up. Over
Okay,
to you.
Jefferson Parish is celebrating its bicentennial this year, but even more important than that, it is claiming, I think correctly, to be the king cake capital of the world. They say there's more king cakes baked in Jefferson Parish than else. That's their icon right now. And if you go to that website, they actually have an interactive map. I looked at the map. There were so many icons of the places where they bake king cakes. I couldn't tell. I figure it's around 20 or 25 places.
Well, that's a really nice thing to be the capital of.
Including a place in Wagaman called the Wandering Goat. But anyway, Jefferson Parish, king cake capital of the world.
Very good. Okay, quickly, John.
On a less bright note, the death penalty is coming back in the news, and a federal judge in the Middle District of Louisiana just reopened a case challenging the protocols, so things are about to heat up in terms
Okay,
of
all right,
where we're
quickly.
going.
LeBron.
Amazing. It is Mardi Gras. I guess the one day that we've got to keep an eye on is this Sunday. There's a 100% chance of rain. Some reschedules already happening in the outer parishes. I'm assuming that something here in Orleans will probably get rescheduled as well.
Okay, real quick, Mike.
And back to crime, this is maybe the kind of dark lining of a big silver cloud of crime reductions is not so rosy a picture with juvenile crime. I do have a couple stories that'll be coming out that shine a little light. It's often not as prominent in the news because a lot of that is cloaked in secrecy.
Right.
But juvenile crime is not the bright spot that the rest of the crime picture has
you're right.
been.
Okay, guys, thanks a lot. Great conversation. Thank you all for joining us. See you again next week from Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
From Masterpiece to Nova, Antiques Roadshow to Agatha Christie,
And of course, stepping out and inform sources.
we are pleased to support public television
It's been our passion.
for a lifetime.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.